In the annals of history, the year 1915 often conjures images of grandeur and celebration in San Francisco, a city reborn from the ashes of the devastating 1906 earthquake. During this period, the city hosted the Panama-Pacific International Exposition, a dazzling display of architectural marvels and cultural exhibits. The exposition was a testament to America's resilience and ingenuity, drawing an astounding 18 million visitors who flocked to witness the spectacle of the gleaming Palace of Fine Arts and the Tower of Jewels, which sparkled with the brilliance of thousands of cut glass gems. Yet, amid the fanfare and festivities, a story of profound mystery unfolded, a story largely hidden from public view and obscured within the dusty pages of archival footnotes. The tale begins not in the bustling streets filled with eager sightseers, but beneath the surface of the San Francisco Bay. It all started with what seemed like a straightforward land reclamation project. The mission was clear. Engineers were tasked with reshaping the mudflats and shallow waters of the bay to create a stable foundation for the exposition's sprawling grounds. The process involved dredging the bay's bottom, pumping the sediment onto marshland to form solid ground suitable for the grand pavilions, which would showcase the pinnacle of American innovation to the world. However, as workers embarked on this ambitious excavation, they stumbled upon an unexpected and bewildering discovery. Beneath the layers of mud and silt, at depths no known construction had ever reached, lay a series of hidden structures. These enigmatic formations did not resemble any documented infrastructure. Comprised of metal frameworks and cylindrical housings, their design was unfamiliar, their purpose unclear, and they bore no resemblance to any known electrical systems of the time. Even comparison with European power systems of that era yielded no match. This startling find, however, was conspicuously absent from the public reports that chronicled the exposition. Newspapers focused on the city's triumphant recovery, leaving this peculiar discovery unmentioned. Yet, within the internal records of that year, a recurring notation hinted at the unease these structures provoked. Pre-existing installations, unexpected configuration, origin unknown. Official accounts would later dismiss these finds as remnants of abandoned telegraph equipment, obsolete maritime signal apparatus, or simply misidentified debris from pre-earthquake construction. These explanations were intended to quell curiosity and avoid public scrutiny. Yet, the dredging photographs, developed in the dimly lit engineering offices at the time, tell a different story. They capture images of workers standing beside metal towers embedded in the bedrock, structures assembled with a precision that defied the capabilities of early 20th century engineering. The cylindrical housings contained internal mechanisms that bore no resemblance to any known American manufacturing techniques, suggesting something far more complex and sophisticated. As the dredging continued, these structures increasingly appeared to be part of a submerged technology, deliberately hidden and forgotten. Initially, the crews categorized their finds in the simplest terms possible: remnants of old pier foundations, abandoned cable housings, or debris from the pre-quake waterfront development. But as documentation accumulated, inconsistencies emerged, leaving engineers with more questions than answers. Why were some frameworks constructed with such tight tolerances, surpassing the capabilities of fabrication shops in that era? Why did certain components appear mass-manufactured rather than custom-forged? And why did these systems extend far beyond the footprint of any documented pier or wharf? The most perplexing question of all concerned the sophistication of these structures. By 1915, San Francisco was rapidly electrifying, yet the infrastructure discovered beneath the bay seemed designed for an advanced form of energy transmission that no contemporary engineer could identify. Quietly, dredging teams admitted to themselves that the design and precision did not align with any known utility company. While they refrained from using phrases like "lost technology," they acknowledged something equally unsettling. An energy grid had been constructed here long before the current era, something beyond simple telegraph lines or primitive arc lights. As documentation of these findings grew, so did the silence surrounding them. Reports became increasingly terse, descriptions vague, and photographs no longer captured the full scope of the discoveries. By mid-1915, Parts of the excavation zones were concealed once again, buried beneath tons of sediment needed for the exposition's foundations. Much of what had been revealed was returned to darkness, hidden beneath the newly formed landfill. All that remained were fragments, notes, a handful of photographs, and the quiet testimonies of engineers who had glimpsed these installations before they were reburied. Yet even from these remnants, a pattern emerged. The infrastructure was too advanced for any known power company, the components too precise for the accepted timeline, and the engineering methods appeared inherited rather than invented. It was a technology that seemed to belong to a different era of development altogether. When the dredging teams first ventured beneath the waterfront, their expectations were modest. They anticipated finding layers of bay mud, perhaps some old pier pilings, and scattered remnants from pre-earthquake construction. They expected nothing unusual, nothing extraordinary. But within weeks, these assumptions crumbled. Instead of a predictable sequence of sediment layers, they uncovered a grid of technological installations that defied conventional understanding of abandoned infrastructure. The first anomaly was the spacing of these installations. Whether discovered near the Marina District, Treasure Island waters, or the Embarcadero, each structure seemed to adhere to the same geometric pattern, maintaining consistent distance intervals and angular relationships. Such precise alignment across different locations was unprecedented. Different builders serving different purposes and constructed in different years did not typically create structures in perfect geometric harmony across kilometers of waterfront. Yet beneath San Francisco Bay, they did. Towers in one section aligned precisely with those discovered in completely different areas. Power conduits maintained the same trajectory, even when separated by hundreds of meters of open water. It was as if every component was part of an original grid, one that had vanished from all utility company records. As workers dug deeper, the structures grew increasingly bizarre. Beneath the expected layers of mud and occasional ship debris, they encountered installations that bore no resemblance to contemporary equipment. The housings were much larger, the internal mechanisms much more complex, and the configurations seemed too mathematically exact for anything in San Francisco's documented timeline. Some structures appeared almost over-engineered, with cylindrical towers exhibiting perfect symmetry and crafted with a precision that did not match the capabilities of the era's crude factories. The most confounding discovery, however, challenged even the most conservative members of the engineering teams. They unearthed wireless transmission apparatus frameworks designed not for cables or wires, but for broadcast transmission. These towers featured geometric coil arrangements, housings with resonance chambers, and lower sections with grounding systems that only made sense for high-frequency energy distribution. Yet, there was no historical record of San Francisco ever experimenting with wireless power transmission before 1915. No document suggested any company had attempted broadcast electricity on such a scale. Nothing explained why large sections of the bay floor were equipped with infrastructure resembling Nikola Tesla's theoretical wireless systems, but built years before Tesla's public demonstrations and decades before any practical implementation. Dredging photographs taken in 1915 offer a startling glimpse of these findings. They show workers dwarfed beside towering structures, components so precisely machined that even today, electrical engineers study the archival images with disbelief. These discoveries, hidden beneath the waves, invite questions that challenge the conventional narratives of history and technology. They suggest a forgotten chapter, one that intertwines mystery and marvel beneath the bustling surface of a city celebrated for its rebirth. The mysterious coil arrangements and resonators discovered beneath the bay waters evoke a sense of intrigue and curiosity, resembling experimental wireless technology far removed from anything typically attributed to early 20th century America. However, the most disturbing aspect of these discoveries lies not in what the photographs reveal, but in what the historical archives fail to mention. The official reports produced in the months following the exposition provide only cursory references to these enigmatic features. Some drawings conspicuously omit any depiction of the tower installations altogether. Instead, certain structures are ambiguously categorized using terms like maritime debris or earlier equipment, despite photographic evidence suggesting they were far more intricate and sophisticated. This deliberate silence raises a series of perplexing questions. If these remarkable findings genuinely belong to known historical periods, why weren't they documented in meticulous detail? Why wasn't there a comprehensive record of these unusual transmission systems? Why were the photographs dispersed among private engineering firms instead of being consolidated into a single municipal report? Even the components themselves seemed to raise suspicions. The surfaces appeared too smooth, the joints too precise, and the coil windings too uniform, indicating a level of precision manufacturing that, according to traditional timelines, was supposedly non-existent during the eras when these towers were believed to have been constructed. As exploration teams delved deeper, it became increasingly challenging to fit these discoveries into the neat, linear narrative of San Francisco's electrical development. Installation by installation, the bay floor began to resemble less of a forgotten telegraph network and more of a hidden power grid, a complex system that was built, operated, and submerged long before recorded history, yet preserved well enough for engineers in 1915 to discern its purpose, even if its origins eluded them. As they ventured further into the bay floor, the findings deviated sharply from anything that belonged to an orderly industrial chronology. What emerged were systems that defied American engineering norms, clashed with European designs, and didn't conform to one another in any conventional sense. Instead, they seemed to form a peculiar technological language, originating from a unified source, yet inexplicably preceding all known historical records. The initial revelation came with the transmission chambers themselves. These were not rudimentary wooden platforms or basic metal frames. They were geometrically perfect, their structures meticulously crafted with precise dimensions. Cylindrical housings retained their shape flawlessly despite enduring decades underwater, and power distribution frameworks were laid out with an almost eerie coherence, akin to remnants of a master grid that had vanished from all known archives. Some chambers were sealed comprehensively and encased in concrete so dense that workers initially mistook them for natural rock formations. Upon breaking them open, they revealed interiors that appeared untouched since the day they were sealed. Smooth metal walls, accommodated components, and machinery that posed more questions than answers, leading to the most baffling feature of all, the enormous resonance towers. Officially, these towers were later dismissed as abandoned lighthouse foundations or old pier supports. Yet nothing about them conformed to typical maritime construction. They were too symmetrical, too precisely engineered, and too perfectly tuned, as if designed with tools capable of calculating electromagnetic resonance frequencies with pinpoint accuracy. Some towers stood tall enough to have once extended above the waterline before submersion. Others housed internal coil mechanisms suggesting a purpose of energy amplification. Workers from 1915 privately described these structures as broadcast antennas transmission devices with a wireless purpose, though none could specify what that purpose might have been or who was responsible for their construction. An additional anomaly emerged in the grounding systems. These were not merely metal plates driven into the mud. Many were intricately integrated into the bedrock itself, positioned at angles that defied conventional logic for lightning protection or static discharge. Embedded in stone that clearly predated any American settlement, these systems were connected to conduits running horizontally across the bay floor rather than vertically to the surface. This arrangement suggested an unsettling possibility. The exposition buildings above ground might not merely rest on reclaimed land, but atop something vastly larger in energy infrastructure, whose purpose remains unrecorded, untaught, and unexplained in the city's official history. As workers dredged deeper, the findings grew increasingly bizarre. Metal components surfaced with perfectly uniform thickness. Some surfaces were finished to an almost frictionless smoothness, while others displayed precision-cut threads so immaculate that modern machinists still debate what tools could have produced them. The material composition of certain insulators caused the most confusion. Some pieces were fashioned from ceramic compounds, unidentifiable by the material scientists of 1915. Others exhibited crystalline structures that formed under conditions far exceeding the capabilities of any kilns or furnaces of the era. The official explanation later offered was that these were unusual mineral deposits or imported materials from the Orient. Yet, this does not account for why these materials appeared in engineered components, not in raw form, but shaped, processed, and manufactured into precise electrical insulators and capacitors. Such material science required techniques far beyond the technological capabilities of the early 20th century, exceeding anything documented in American industrial history. Shortly after these discoveries, something peculiar began to occur. Chambers were once more filled with sediment. Tower bases were covered. Deep sections of the bay floor were isolated from further dredging. Officially, this was attributed to safety concerns, deemed necessary to create stable ground for the exposition structures above. However, the decisions regarding which installations to rebury first and which areas to permanently cover raised quiet yet significant questions among observers. The structures that were immediately reburied invariably contained the most anomalous technology. The resonance towers, the unknown ceramic insulators, the integrated grounding systems, the transmission chambers that seemed to connect to infrastructure extending far beyond the exposition grounds. Perhaps the most enigmatic discovery of all lay in the connecting conduits. These were not random pipes. They were part of an organized grid, a network of energy distribution that appeared less like abandoned equipment and more like a continental system. Aligned, standardized, planned, it was as if they once transmitted power to every major city on the Pacific coast through an underground and underwater mechanism now unrecognizable. Yet almost as soon as they were uncovered, many were sealed again, their chambers filled, their purpose unexplored, their existence quietly erased from subsequent maps. When examining the final weeks of the 1915 land reclamation project, a striking realization becomes impossible to ignore. The dredging did not conclude naturally. It was abruptly halted, not completed, not brought to a close, but stopped. As the exploration teams delved deeper beneath the waters of San Francisco Bay, the tone of their documentation began to shift significantly. In the initial phases, the entries in their logs brimmed with confidence and a sense of routine, as if the task at hand was straightforward and expected. However, as they ventured further, the language used in the records took on a more cautious and ambiguous tone. There was an unsettling sense of incompleteness in their notes, suggesting an unseen force had suddenly dictated what could be documented. It is at this juncture that the greatest enigma emerges, for the final structures uncovered beneath the bay's waters were far from ordinary. They bore no resemblance to telegraph equipment, lighthouse foundations, or any other known infrastructure familiar to the era. Instead, they were something entirely different, something beyond the comprehension of the teams at that time. The surviving reports, though few in number, describe a transition from the familiar to the inexplicable. They speak of technology whose complexity defied the capabilities of early 20th century America. The precision of the components was astonishing, with housings so meticulously crafted that not even a sheet of paper could be inserted between them. The resonance coils were wound with an accuracy that seemed impossible for the technology of that period. Transmission chambers were designed to handle energy levels far exceeding anything documented above ground in the city, and conduits stretched beyond the dredging zone, disappearing into the mysterious depths beneath the modern bay. Yet, the most advanced discoveries were those that were reburied with the greatest haste. Workers described an immediate process of refilling entire chambers, covering tower foundations, and packing sediment into installations they had only just unearthed. Official explanations cited structural concerns, looming exposition deadlines, and material shortages. However, if these actions were driven solely by construction timelines, why was the most sophisticated engineering buried first, while corroded debris was left exposed for documentation? This paradox only begins to make sense if these deep-seated discoveries posed a different kind of existential threat to historical narrative rather than physical safety. If indeed the infrastructure hidden beneath San Francisco Bay demonstrated engineering prowess beyond the capabilities of the early 20th century, and if some of that technology was unassociated with any known power company, then the accepted chronology of American electrical development could unravel. Consider the implications if the foundation of a world's exposition was built atop something ancient, something advanced, something engineered by hands unknown to us. What if the bay floor was not merely a convenient location for modern development, but rather a deliberate burial ground for technology that challenges every assumption about the timeline of wireless power transmission? Perhaps this is why the discoveries of 1915 were quietly reburied, not to safeguard the progress of construction, but to protect the prevailing narrative. Photographs that survived from that era tell a story of their own. They depict workers standing beside towers with designs that appear surprisingly modern. Components captured in these images resemble Tesla coils. Though they predated their widespread use by decades, the systems uncovered were too integrated, too sophisticated for the time period they were attributed to. Such revelations are not ones historians are eager to confront. They are the types of discoveries that are often left unspoken. This brings us to the ultimate question, one that no archive, textbook, or official document has ever satisfactorily addressed. Why was the most advanced evidence, the most sophisticated technology, the most anomalous infrastructure once again sealed beneath the bay? When viewed from a broader perspective, a pattern emerges. Resonance towers were buried, wireless transmission chambers concealed, unknown insulators covered, and even parts of the photographic evidence vanished. It is almost as if the land reclamation inadvertently unveiled a chapter of history that was meant to remain hidden. A chapter predating the earthquake of 1906, predating American settlement, and predating the narrative we have come to accept. For a fleeting moment in 1915, the bay revealed a secret from the depths of time. Yet, instead of investigating it, they chose to cover it up, to bury it, to forget it, whether intentionally or not. If San Francisco truly rests atop an energy grid constructed by a civilization no longer acknowledged, then the real question is not solely about what was uncovered in 1915. It is about what other secrets lie beneath the waterfronts of the world. What other harbors and bays, what other conveniently reclaimed lands, conceal something that was never supposed to be discovered? The wireless energy pylons of 1915 were not merely remnants of an abandoned infrastructure from a forgotten time. They offered a brief, accidental glimpse into a version of history that we were perhaps never meant to witness.